Body, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to councillors.
Okay. We're starting now. I'm going to shut the door.
Joanna's now on mute. Welcome, Joanna. Welcome to everyone else who has joined us virtually, and welcome to our visitors. Nice to see you here, Liz. I'll start with the karakia.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Have we got a quorum? Anybody next door?
We've got more than half, so I assume we have, yes.
And we have councillor Spot online.
Oh, right. Cool.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I should have. I'll do the karakia and then I'll do apologies and who's online with regards to councillors online. Stua ki ranga, stua ki rao, stua ki weho, stua ki wopo, stua ki tia tangara, karonga te ho, karonga te ao, omie, luie, take. And that is unite above, unite below, unite without, unite within, unite as one, listen to the night, listen to the world of light. Now we come together as one. Right, we have apologies from Tim and Kevin. We have Brian online. Are there any other apologies, or have we got any other councillors online?
Apology for Elliot lateness.
Apologies from Elliot for lateness. Good. Do I need consecutive?
It's just does move and second.
Okay, I'll move those apologies be received. Seconded by Kate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Okay, moving on to the public forum. First, we've got Joanna Perry, who is the Community Development Coordinator for Link Upper Clutha, and they have been involved, Joanna and no doubt others have been involved in the public bus trial in and around Wanaka, Lake Hawea, Albert Town, etc. So no doubt, Joanna, you'll be able to share with us the challenges and learnings. So we look forward to your presentation. You've got 5 minutes, but because you come from Central Otago, well, Queenstown Lakes, in fact, I'll be reasonably lenient. On your hand, there may be some questions when you complete your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Joanna Perry. Community Networks Link, we're a non-profit based in Wanaka, so we serve the Upper Clutha across the full health and wellbeing spectrum. And one role we play is community development, so enabling action on key grassroots community issues as they emerge, such as the growing need for public transport in our district. So hopefully you're all familiar with the community shuttle trial project that we've been running over the last year and a half or so. So we've run 2 3-month public transport trials, the first in 2022 and the second in 2023, which set out to capture the need for and the feasibility of public transport in the Upper Clutha. The final report of these trials I released earlier this week. I believe some of you have seen it or got sent it by Quentin Smith, but I can share it after the meeting. I believe Alexa has it, so I can share it with the rest.
That'd be great if you could share it with all of us. Thanks, Joanna.
Absolutely, we'll do. So I'll just give you a very brief overview, I guess, of that report today. So yeah, the first trial, it ran from September to December in 2022, and the primary aim was to connect outlying townships, Lake Hawea, Hawea Flat and Albert Town into Wanaka. So it was aimed to particularly serve the needs of those transport disadvantaged groups in those outlying communities, such as seniors or children needing to come into Wanaka to access medical services or grocery shopping, after school activities, connection with other people. We had a limited scope and budget for that first trial, so the trial ran 3 days a week. But despite that limitation, it was considered to be a success, though we proved there was some demand with an average of around 18 rides taken per day, and that number continued to grow over the 3 months. And we had really positive feedback from service users. So that was enough for us to see that it was worth doing a second trial. And the second trial, we received financial support from QLDC through the Climate Action and Biodiversity Plan, and from Lake Wanaka Tourism as part of their regenerative tourism work. So the second trial sought to refine elements of the first in response to feedback from the community, and also to try different things and gather slightly different data. So that this one ran 5 days a week, and alongside a streamlined version of the Harwaya Albertown Wanaka connection, which was better suited to commuters and took a lot less time. We also tried a completely new idea, which was intra-city loops around Wanaka itself, connecting residential areas like North Lake, medical centre, grocery stores, 3 parks on a loop. It wasn't a continuous loop. So it kind of it went hourly or 2 hourly, again, due to some limitations with budget and scope. The cost of both trials was $2 per person per ride. So it's heavily subsidized by us, but we felt that was important to get people interested in riding in the first place, considering that public transport is a relatively new concept here. So in terms of our learnings and challenges, there's 35 pages of them, which I'll share with you after the meeting. But to give you some overarching highlights, the community shuttle trials demonstrated the growing need for public transport in the Upper Clutha, particularly for connecting those outlying townships into Wanaka. So although we had limited time and scope for both trials, we see the patronage continue to increase over both 3-month periods, which we think is really promising. Less so with those intra-city loops that I mentioned. We didn't see as much growth in that particular part of the service. And there are a number of reasons for that, including it being a newer concept for people to wrap their heads around. The loop's not running continuously, as I mentioned, so not really suiting people wanting to do some errands and then get straight home. They would need to sort of plan to wait or to fill the time between services. And it didn't visit as many residential areas as a service ideally would have done, again, because we just had this one vehicle to just do this one loop. But there's a huge amount of growth in residential areas all over Wanaka. For those people to use that service, they'd have had to walk 10-15 minutes. And generally I think the consensus is if I have to get in my car to go some of the way, I will just stay in my car. But lots of learning there. Overall, a more substantial trial would be needed to find out what patronage is achievable in the long term. But in terms of the benefits that we saw coming out of this trial and the benefits that we believe public transport would bring to our community, it supported connection. On the bus itself, we had a lot of feedback about people having a chat to people they wouldn't normally speak to on the bus itself, and for seniors especially, who are maybe quite isolated in their communities, but also connecting people to work, to recreation, to community activities who would otherwise be relying on private vehicles. In the face of increased living and fuel costs, the shuttle offered a very affordable way for our community to travel. And it did prove itself to be a viable way for our community to contribute to decarbonisation. So we had limited data around this, but we were able to make some estimations that the second trial resulted in a light vehicle fleet VKT reduction of around 50,000 kilometres over the 3 months. So we can see if that was a continued service, it would make a big impact in that space, particularly for those short journeys, which I think is one of our top emission causes in New Zealand. So we're excited to see that conversations about public transport are really starting to kick off now with yourselves and with QRDC's travel demand management business case. So we really look forward to continuing to work with you all going forward, finding public transport solutions for the Upper Clutha. And that's my spiel.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Alexa has just flicked the trial results around, so Yep. So you don't need to bother doing that.
Right.
Just on behalf of the Regional Council, thank you very much for your good work and the people that assisted you, because the information that you've collated during those 2 trials is critical and vital for us as we move forward and consider expansion of public transport services throughout Otago. So really appreciate your good work. And I'll just check with the team to see if there's any questions from councillors. That includes councillors online, and we have Michael Laws has joined us online as well now. But are there any questions for Joanna?
No.
Hello.
Hello, Michael. You're good, Gary. Yep. Okay.
So can I clarify the 18 rides per day, how that works? Is that 18, the figure you gave on the first trial?
Yeah, that's just an average. So we had 665 rides over the first trial. And I've just divided that by the number of days the trial ran to pull out a general average, but really the numbers grew. So
Yeah, it's not, so, it's not a averaging exercise. What was your most successful route, I suppose, or service that you provided?
the most successful in terms of numbers was the first trials only route, which was starting in Lake Hawea Flat, Albert Town into Wanaka.
Yeah, intuitive. There's one issue that we discussed when we were actually up there and we were heading out towards Hawea, is the bridge. Does the bridge compromise a bus service to an extent because everyone gets choked up at that one lane bridge?
Does it what? Sorry, does it
compromise the efficiency of the service? You've got a one lane bridge that everyone gets tangled up in.
I mean, I don't believe that was something that happened because we aim to avoid the timings of the trial, aim to avoid those real peak times, but it's certainly something to note that we were kind of trying to say, don't get in the queue, get on the bus, but actually the bus gets stuck in the same queue. And it's the same on the roundabout coming in State Highway 6 after Three Parks, the big roundabout where you've got Anderson Road going up to the right. Again, we have a huge bottleneck situation going on there as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Joanna, I assume that you've got some networking going on, obviously, with our staff at the Otago Regional Council. So, you'll no doubt having conversations with them from time to time, historically and going forward.
Yeah, historically we've dealt with Gary Maloney, who was very helpful in the first trial, and with Doug. I haven't been able to connect with Lorraine, but we are both involved in inputting into that travel demand management business case through QRDC.
Awesome. There appears not to be any more questions, but once again, thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you. Thanks for today. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Joan.
Moving on to the second item on the public forum, which is Dave McPherson. I'm not sure whether okay. It's not Dave. Welcome, Dave, and your assistant. And you're going to talk to us about Save Our Trains, Ōtepoti, Dunedin. Nice to have you here, Dave.
Sorry, we're just getting instructions on that. No problem. Presentation. Yeah, I'm here past it.
So that's not sustainable.
Easier to let the experts do this.
Absolutely. Nice to have you here, Dave. Would you like to introduce your support person and then we'll
look, my name's Dave McPherson. I'm a representative of Save Our Trains Ōtepoti Dunedin, which is a new group set up. This is Elena McLean, also from our working group, shall we say. And we'll make the presentation, which will be up on the board shortly.
Welcome,
yes,
Elena.
I was that in front of yours.
Thank you.
Just one more.
No, in just a moment, it'll be up on the screen.
Okay. Not sure what my cues are. Sorry.
Do you personally, not a personal question, but do you base yourself in Dunedin or in the Waikato?
Oh, no, I'm Dunedin, been a Dunedin resident and one of your ratepayers for a year and a half now.
Someone by the same name that pops up in the media from time to time. And
it's true that I used to be from the Waikato Council, and we did meet once or twice, I think, along the way.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
I escaped.
Well, we were the winners then. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make this presentation. I'll just we're a fairly new group here in Dunedin, but we have the national organisation has been going for a couple of years now and convened national conferences that include a lot of government and private sector officials, as well as community organisations like ours. I want to stress that we're not an anti-car group. We're not here to sort of get people necessarily out of their cars. What we're here for is to ensure there's some sort of greater transport choice available, and we believe that passenger rail is one of those choices and options that should be available and could be available and is starting to be available in other parts of both the world and New Zealand, particularly the North Island. We'd like to see it moving south as well, but we're not pro-rail ideologues in the sense that it has to be rail or nothing. We believe that's just one of the options that needs to be provided. So I want to sort of preface our remarks by that. Our presentation, I'm not going to go through the wording of the presentation. You can read that yourselves, I'm sure. We are particularly supportive of rail because it addresses some of the issues like social isolation, carbon emissions, and resilience that aren't sort of necessarily addressed by having too few options, just like, for instance, just road travel. So some of the issues that we think are particularly important, it is an important part of climate change mitigation action, and it does provide resilience in times of weather outages on the road service and things like that. I saw a recent point about the Kaikoura earthquake when both the road and rail lines were completely stuffed, not to use a technical term, around Kaikoura. The rail line was resurrected and got going and providing services to and through Kaikoura in 9 months. It took over 18 months for the road connection to be restored there. So that was interesting to us. It also connects friends and families for all sorts of occasions and brings regional communities together. It's very difficult for people who don't have cars in regional communities to connect with both their families and with services and other centres. And maybe, Helena, you want to say something about the health services side of things?
Yes. Currently, there are no options for people with a variety of different disabilities to actually travel outside of Dunedin. I myself have not travelled outside of Dunedin for 15 years. Due to health conditions. I cannot catch a plane, I cannot catch a bus. The process of getting from the airport car park actually onto a plane is inhibitive for me for my health conditions, and I'm not able to achieve it. I also can't step up onto buses, and I can't sit for the length of time that is required to be on a bus. So I am Dunedin bound. I am not able to attend any funerals, any reunions or anything outside of Dunedin. The only option for me personally to travel is a train, because I can access it more easily and I can get up and move and sit back down, etc. So given that I am 54 and I already have a number of disabilities, which, you know, for but the grace of God, any one of you could also be in my position, and there are hundreds of thousands of other people in my position. I feel that there is a duty for any governing body, be it local, regional or national, to actually look out for the most vulnerable of our society. And that means we have access to other things that are, you know, we can meet with our family and stuff. And also currently, I'm not sure, some of you may be pet owners, we have a significant vet shortage in Dunedin. And if anybody's dog or cat, etc., needs surgery, you have to go to Christchurch, which means you have to have a car and you have to have support in order to get there. There's also some health services for human beings that are not accessible in Dunedin, and people have to travel to Christchurch to get radiotherapy, for example.
Thanks. Just a couple of other points on why passenger rail I want to mention. Less cars on our road actually improve safety, both for the people that aren't in the cars and in trains, but also for the remaining people that do need to be on roads. And make a point also that local and interregional rail is making a big comeback overseas, not just in Europe, but in places like Australia, North America, which traditionally have car cultures, and even in the North Island of New Zealand. I'm going to touch on some of those points. Just mention that the photo you can see there is actually of the rail car from Alexandra to Dunedin in 1967, just leaving the bridge on the Dunedin side of Alex. So there was once a passenger rail service. When I started this exercise, I hadn't been aware of that. So I'm not saying we're going to be able to get that going again, because that's a cycle trail now, but it's an interesting bit of history. And if we could move on to the next slide, thanks. There is a lot of history of rail in the South Island, but it's not just a historical thing. On the left-hand side are all the rail lines we used to have, but on the right-hand side, you can see that the key routes are still in place. And there is still the option for using rail to connect a lot of communities in the South Island, not the least of which, of course, is Dunedin to the north, to Christchurch, and all those significant towns in between, but also to the south, Invercargill area, or even just Balclutha, which is still in our area here. And recently, the investment in the Hillside Railway Workshops has also been one of the advances that has happened here, which is quite important. And we do want to mention Dunedin Rail, which is potentially a significant player. At the moment, it only runs tourist excursions, but we note just in the last couple of weeks, it's agreed to connect with cruise ships where possible, which is one of the demands of the Dunedin community that's been floating around for quite a while. It already travels to Oamaru on a monthly basis. It could do that more often. It could travel further afield. And some of you may have seen just last week, Dr. Duncan Connors from the university proposing that a rail service be an intermittent one, for at least to start with, for students accessing Otago University from Christchurch, be instituted, which could be with Dunedin Rail facilities and carriages and so forth. So if we could move on there, just touching on some of the other initiatives. What we're particularly interested in is the restoration of the rail service connecting Dunedin with Christchurch, with the potential to go to Invercargill, but that's not what we're proposing here from Dunedin. We think that the core of the service would be us from here going northwards. We did a comparison of the costs to a person, a private individual travelling between here and Christchurch. And if you look at the internal inland revenue prices for using a car, the cost would be about $340 all up. Even if you just took petrol, it'd be about 110, we calculate, versus an average of about $265 for an airfare. That includes getting back out to the airport, and versus the type of fare we're talking about if we followed the couple of trains that are going in the North Island on an interregional basis for $50 to $60 for a single standard fare to Christchurch. So there's quite a difference there. Time-wise, which is often cited as a reason for not having trains, it'll be about 5 hours, 40 minutes based on the previous southerner experience to get from here to Christchurch. It'll be about 4 hours, 50 minutes when you talk about a little bit of a stop in between for food or petrol or whatever if you're in a car, and 3 hours, 20 minutes. It's not to fly. It's not just the 1 hour and 15 minutes. It's getting to and from the airport, the waiting, the checking, and all of that sort of stuff there. So it's well worth that comparison. We're also interested in the potential of an establishment of a commuter rail service from Mosgiel to Dunedin and potentially on through to Port Chalmers, and obviously in return as well, particularly at peak times. The southern motorway is getting more congested, not just the southern motorway. I was held up by some of the roads actually coming in from South Dunedin this morning. So, you know, that one thing rail does is travel on a different carriageway from roads. So it gives you that potential of bypassing road congestion. Perhaps we could move on there. Just mention some recent passenger rail developments in New Zealand. Firstly, there's been, and this has involved the regional councils of both Wellington and Horizons, Manawatu, Whanganui. There's been a contract led to buy new hybrid trains for both the Capital Connection Service connecting Palmerston North with Wellington, and perhaps going on, extending out to Fielding or even Whanganui has been suggested, and the Wairarapa connection going up to Masterton. So those are sort of locked in for the future, and those trains will be arriving in about 4 years' time. There's been an expansion announced very recently of the successful Te Huia service from Hamilton to Auckland, with perhaps an extension of that to Tauranga that's now being campaigned for actively in the Bay of Plenty, to link up those two services. The City Rail Loop, of course, in Auckland is a big thing that's been got going recently, and there's now a study into connecting the Hamilton and Palmerston North-based rail services with the Central North Island service as well. And I know very recently the Northern Explorer has agreed to restore the stop in Taumarunui, so we can start singing that song again, which hasn't been sung for about 30 years, because we never did stop in Taumarunui and all of that in the last 30 years.
Dave, you've got about another couple of minutes.
Yeah,
so
sure. I'm
that
just
right
going
now.
to flick
you.
over the next.
Cool.
Next slide is just on. I won't go into, but we surveyed the MP candidates in this area as to their views on this, and there are 4 of them that have actually been elected, and you can read those views for yourselves. If we can flick over, the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions are a major issue. Dunedin City Council has a target of ending them of net zero emissions by 2030, and government-wise under both major parties is by 2050.
And just on that point, just like to note that that is the community. The community has lobbied for that net zero target. The community, the people that you represent, have asked for that.
And the next slide just touches on the point that transport makes a major contribution in the urban area. We don't want to talk about emissions outside the urban area. We want to focus on that, and that's what we believe rail transport could be targeting. The next slide just talks about the relative carbon footprint of different transport modes, and you can see rail, apart from active transport like cycling and walking, is the lowest contributor of all transport modes to carbon emissions. Just going on to the last slide there, it's what we're asking for from the Regional Council. We'd like you to insert into your 10-year plan, regional land transport plans, the conduct of a feasibility study into both the rail services that we have proposed. Firstly, the Southerner, and secondly, the Mosgiel to Dunedin / Port Chalmers local commuter connection, and look at alternative funding for that. We're not just suggesting it be from rates. Waka Kotahi has contributed to similar studies elsewhere in the country, and we believe the central government will have funds, especially with New Zealand First being likely part of the government. Things like the Provincial Growth Fund will be ideal for uplifting some support for a feasibility study for something like that. So we're looking at a sort of a community system-wide support. Let's have a good look at what the figures are. Let's have a good look at what would be involved in getting something going, and then let the community make a decision. So that's our proposition. Sorry, it's a bit rushed there.
No, all good. No, and to be fair, I didn't tell you you only had 10 minutes at the start. So
No, I did know that.
Oh, okay,
Your staff have been very good in letting us know.
No worries at all. Just a question on the comparison between the South Island network, North Island network, and the ability in if a feasibility study was undertaken, it probably would reveal the challenges, but there would be a bit of a difference being able to establish passenger services in the North Island versus, which is obviously there was already some there and looks like there'll be more in the future. But because of our network, there are limitations simply because, you know, the freight has sort of been the primary focus, single line. So are you able to share with us any of the knowledge that you have on that aspect?
Yeah, look, we faced, when I was in the Waikato, faced very similar problem. Both lines, the East Coast and the North Island main trunk line, converged in Hamilton, go to Auckland for reasons of freight more than anything else. And we had to fit passenger trains in between the freight trains, and there had to be, Kiwi Rail helped with this, a bit of juggling of both potential timetables and some installation of new equipment on the trains that allowed them to travel more closely together as well, so you could fit more in a given sort of time slot within that. And going through Auckland with only 2 lines and heavy freight between the ports of Tauranga and Auckland, that was a massive problem there. But we've managed to have 2 and some days 3 services, return services a day going through there, and that freight usage is heavier than even down here, which I know is heavy as well.
Thank you, Dave. I'll just check if there's any other queries. Elliot.
Yeah, I was just wondering what if you have any thoughts on what the sort of best points of entry are to you know, getting progress in this space. Do you think it is primarily something like a trial or, you know, a feasibility study, or do you think sort of the university trial that is maybe going ahead and working on expanding that, or do you think sort of freight and electrifying that so that it's ready for passenger rail, I guess, or do you think it's sort of a combination of all of these forces?
I think a feasibility study would tease that out a bit, but it seems to me that given you're talking about longer distances here, if you're talking about Christchurch, you may not want to have a fully scheduled service to start with. You may want to start with some things like the university train. There's always big rugby matches with Canterbury and Otago teams. Use some of those opportunities to build the knowledge and the culture about it. Do things like seasonal trips more, test your hardware and the engines that they can go that far. There isn't, if I said tomorrow we want to start a service, it wouldn't be possible because there isn't the engines or carriages that are ready to do that yet. So there takes a bit of preparation as well, but start with somewhat small steps, but have a plan in mind and have a trial period for when you do start scheduled services. That's a decent trial period, not a sort of a 6-month trial or anything like that.
But also with the tourism trains that are running already, that are inaccessible to everyday people, there's no logic.
Yeah, it's been suggested, for instance, that the coastal Pacific could extend down to Dunedin, that wide stop in Christchurch. And then if you've got trains like that, and it's been suggested also for the Transalpine, is have a local fare for domestic passengers, say using it between Christchurch and Greymouth for reasons of work or visiting family, not because they're tourists. Why? And they do this sort of thing in Australia quite regularly on several of their inter-regional services.
Excellent. And I'd also just like to note that on that slide that has the 2 maps of what there was previously, I feel an immense sense of pride when I look at that map of what our pioneers, our early settlers actually built and created. And that was not only for goods, like we're doing at the moment with freight, that was to connect people for work and stuff. And really, this is all about people. And we're now moving into an environment quite speedily that is going to have a significant impact on us as people. We're going to have to learn to live in an entirely different way, and being able to, for people to be able to connect with each other and share resources, like we're going to have to change our food systems, everything with the climate chaos that is going to be impacting us. And it's if they could do that back then, I quite frankly fail to see why we even need to be having these meetings personally. As an activist, it's just over my head. But all of us will have ancestral ties or will have benefited from the people who put those tracks together in extraordinarily difficult situations. Like, they could do it then. How on earth can we be sitting here in 2023 saying it's too hard?
Well, Lena, thank you, and Dave, thank you. You've given us something to think about, and really appreciate you being here today with us.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for the opportunity.
Moving on to item 4, which is the confirmation of the agenda. I will move that the agenda be confirmed with the addition of the item security for Dunedin public transport is included as 8.5, seconded by Alexa. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Item number 5, which is the declaration of interest. It's just the standard reminder that you need to step aside if there is a conflict or perceived conflict. Confirmation of the minutes, item 6. Would someone like to move that the minutes of the public portion of the Public and Active Transport Committee held on the 9th of August 2023 be received and confirmed as a true and correct record? Moved by Alexa, seconded by Kate. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Actions. If there are any. Moving on to the first item for matters for consideration, 8.1, transport operating environment. Welcome to Lorraine, Transport Manager. We've got an update on what's either has evolved in Wellington or is evolving in Wellington, plus operational matters as well, changes, etc. So welcome, Lorraine. We'll take the report as read, but is there anything you wanted to open with initial comments or anything?
Just wanted to quickly go through, just to note that the Land Transport Management Act amendments gained royal assent, and it's a bit untimely now. The government position policy statement on land transport came out, I think, the week after our last meeting of the PATC, and so there's just an update in there and record of the submissions that were made from this council and from the RTCs. We're pleasantly pleased with the document. We were, and I guess some of the key points were probably the $3 billion Crown loan to the National Land Transport Fund, which might be perceived as a bit of a gift horse because it's good to have the money, but it's a loan, and it sort of brings into question how it gets paid in the future and what impact that has on the sustainability of the fund. Just in reference to the last presenters, there's an activity class for interregional transport, but probably it's looks like, as it is in terms of the fund, would support the services that were talked about, like the Tahuia and perhaps the extension of that out to Tauranga, and the capital connections primarily. I think the things to watch, so given that this came out just after the last meeting and then we've had a general election, is I guess how the funding changes around what was previously the Climate Emergency Relief Fund. There was some hypothecated funds within the NLTF for walking and cycling. That kind of spend, the emphasis on that might change to also mentioned previously Provincial Growth Fund funding, which has a different impact. And I guess what we'll be keeping an eagle eye on is as the new government forms and when the GPS is finalised, what happens to the range for the PT public transport services activity class, which has previously had been a 50% increase on the mid-range. So the range is 420 to 700 million. And however, of that, roughly 407 million is committed. So through all of our continuous programs and what we do. But meaning that if the range as it is around 13 to around $293 million available for improvements, which are what our business cases might be delivering. But that could change if the new government has a different view on how big that range should be. But we'll report to you when we find out. The national ticketing system, I'm just keeping that on the radar and just noting that the plan still is that Otago region is poised to be last due to our administration of the regional integrated transport ticketing, regional integrated ticketing, the RITS system. I thought I should also just explain it to you, because if you got to paragraph 21 and you hadn't lost your will to keep reading, which I think if we third word is an acronym, I thought I should apologise and give you the opportunity to ask any questions. Relation to the regional land transport plan, after the election, Waka Kotahi revised its timeline for the National Land Transport Plan, so that's program, so that's good, and that it allows us a bit more time to prepare our RLTPs, an extra 6 weeks, and it further allows us to avoid consultation over the Christmas New Year period, which was undesirable, but what we were looking at, so we'll consult in the new year now. But of course, it does mean that the release of the National Land Transport Program is delayed, and so the confirmation of what's in and what's out is delayed. And then for operational, just to mention that the Mosgiel Express and additional services been in operation since the 4th of September. There's been good uptake, but we're monitoring review, and we're also going to run a little survey to enable people to give some feedback to see if we might further tweak or enhance that service. In relation to the cruise ship season, I think I have to say that even the best laid plans do not always go to plan. We do have plans. We're proposing some almost 300 additional services that will, we hope, deal with a lot of the issues that they had last year on those days when we have large ships or multiple ships. There's about 5 days that even with the multiple ships or the very large ones, we think we'll still struggle, and we're trying to communicate better about that. And we also have some arrangements with the operator, as well as providing the additional services to run the regular scheduled services, at least leaving Port Chalmers and the hub with some capacity to pick up the locals who will be expecting those services. The irregular ones pick up passengers along the way. As I mentioned, that did not go to plan on Monday. And we're working very closely with the operator to ensure that plans do go to plan from now on. However, we have to note the next big day is the 17th, and that is one of those days that we felt even with the additional services and our best plans, we're not fully going to mitigate the impact of just the sheer numbers coming through. We'll have people on the ground managing the queues, and also another plan. What we have arrangement is that the cruise ship passengers will buy cash fares from the library and they'll be directed. And so we'll be managing that on the ground more actively, especially on the 17th. And then the final point is just noting some work that we're currently, the team is working on in conjunction, in this case with Dunedin City Council, and it's just a collaborative process that is probably a little bit differently to how we've done things past. We're calling it a bus stop audit, and we're collating our information and I guess auditing it as part of our RTI rollout to make sure that we continue to, as we roll out and install real-time information at stops, that we're doing them at the stops and in the places that complement the, I guess, the asset management plans that, in this case, the ECC has for the shops and stops and shelters. Yeah. I think that's paragraph 40 kind of sums that all up. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Lorraine. I should have welcomed Pim, our General Manager Transport. Thanks for being with us, Pim. And I also should have, and you've acknowledged that the submission from ourselves to the draft GPS and also from the RTC chairs is attached for our information. So thank you for adding that in. And can I just, I'm going to go to Alexa in a sec. Can I just go back to the new operating model, the Sustainable Public Transport Framework? You mentioned in paragraph 8 about opportunities with regards to Dunedin Unit 5 bus service and also the Queenstown ferry service. I just wondered, with those opportunities, will they evolve in time, or are you able to give a little bit of thinking that around we see the opportunities?
They are, they will evolve over time, but I think they are around how some of the infrastructure is, and the services could be owned and operated differently in the future. So they're sort of things that I think are giving us more scope in the business case. The business case hasn't been finalised, but in particular the Queenstown business case, where we using, I guess, the full scope of the Sustainable Public Transport Framework. It's a little bit different.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Alexa, then Kate.
Thank you, Lorraine. Lots of great stuff in there to be considering. First question, I've got 3 questions. Firstly, is when are we likely to be included when the national new ticketing systems roll through and will be last? There's no timeline in there. Is there one anywhere?
Oh, 2026.
And so is there a very big gap between the first councils coming on and us being the last one?
Well, Christchurch going, ECAN going first in 2024, so it's a
so it's 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Right.
There'll be a lot of learnings, I think, along the way.
Yeah, it won't be a bad thing necessarily, but there might be some expectation in communities we won't meet, but that's right. The other one was with the cruise ones, as you've got in here, it ends up being cost neutral for us with the extra services, which is great. But I still feel that there's an unacceptable externalisation onto taxpayers and ratepayers of these extra services. Is there any way of making cruises pay?
Making
the cruise ships themselves?
I'll answer that one. There's not. No, so it would there's no way of forcing that on them. And once people, the discussion once people are on the landward side, there is no way of excluding them. So there is encouragement that can be given for, I guess, more equitable transport costs through the different ways we can get them into town, but there's no way to force the issue, and there's also no way to exclude them from public
so we're just stuck with that. Okay,
so we just need to keep, I mean, it's been a very sort of the report back we've had from our transport staff from Port Otago, it's been a much more planned and collaborative exercise this year to come up with increased services, trains, shuttles. It's probably still not exactly right, and we'll just have to monitor it as we go, but we've just got to be clear about what the levers are, and you know,
Yeah.
once people are here, they can choose to use public transport.
All good, I'll just raise it. That's another externalisation of private industry onto public money. But anyway, on we go. I also wanted to raise, and I wonder about how we might cope with things like the TA's ability to pay for more services. I mean, you've noted the billions of dollars in the plan for as a loan. We've also noted that we're going to be looking at local shares for improved public transport. How do we deal with places like Queenstown that are bouncing up against the debt structures and their ability to pay may be reduced? You note that their ability to pay will be reduced in the submission to government. I'm not being very articulate, I'm sorry. Do you understand what I'm on about? What do we do about their inability to pay,
Can I
perhaps?
Sorry,
that might
I
be
just
good.
want to caution us against starting to pass judgment on another. We know there are some challenges there, but we've just got to be careful because that's their budgets to manage, and obviously they will have a role in. So I'll let Lorraine talk about the joint work program.
Okay.
In the close, I just cautious we're getting into too much detail into another council's budget at this stage.
Yeah.
We just got it raised in the submission.
So we obviously through our business cases, both for fares and frequency and the Queenstown Public Service, we've worked on the project team. We have the TAs. So we are identifying costs earlier at where their infrastructure is needed to support the services, and we do. We will be looking for alternative sources of funding, but obviously that's not necessarily the council. So we're looking for covering all of the costs and where we could find alternative sources of funding for those projects. In respect of, I don't know, there's a link, I don't know if anybody looked into it, and the link to the National Party manifesto. They
Yes.
do actually have for Otago Southland some money for bridges, which in the case of the Queenstown would be, you know, if that pans out, then that would be sort of another source. May not necessarily be the NLTF, but it might be another source of funding for what could be a key part of infrastructure for that business case.
Okay, thanks. We just need to keep an eye on that, I guess.
And then just to add to that, the new joint advisory group that yourself and Andrew and Gretchen sit on as well, to ensure that the investments are lined up so that it's a joint prioritisation exercise to make sure there's not investment going somewhere which relies on subsequent investment in road infrastructure, whatever it might be, that's not going to happen. So we don't end up, no one's got a lot of money, so where we're spending it, we've got to make sure it's well coordinated. And hopefully out of the advisory group, we start to see a little bit better alignment of those work programs.
So sorry,
Thank you.
can I just add, because I can't believe I didn't mention it first of all, and of course we pull together the regional land transport plan. So we are we're sitting with them on the business case, but we're also making sure that the where they need to make provision, or where people can and are making provision, that our programs are aligned through the RLTP. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Kate, Gary, then Elliot.
Just making a statement about externalisation of things. I think getting tourists going into Queenstown onto buses is something we really drive for, so we have to be consistent with our views. But anyway, it's great that you've done all of this work on the cruise ships, and well done. Can I just then say, how does this look for the student at Logan Park getting on a bus to go to an NCCA exam, and thank God there aren't any on the 17th of November, because sometimes we put so much effort into considering the new and we don't consider the regular person. And I'm not quite sure if you've had any of those thoughts about the regular users and how it might affect their usage of the system, and whether they're going to be catered for, or do they get a special pass through quickly?
So that's the instruction that we have with the drivers, that they don't leave Port Chalmers or the regular scheduled service. So the bus that the student would be expecting to take does not leave Port Chalmers or the hub, if it's in the afternoon, without capacity, so that all of the passengers can be picked up. The regular passengers should be able to be picked up along the way. And the managing of that's also the managing of the queues on the ground is to ensure, to give the drivers support, but also to say that the cruise ship passengers, your next bus is coming along here.
So the messaging has gone to those students that they can have that confidence in the system. That's what I mean. We're ensuring that we're getting the message to the cruise ships, but are we ensuring the schools or the workers understand that?
Yes, the communications have gone out. And it's all about there's 5 days that, you know, it's probably not, we probably will have some issues, but we're doing our best efforts. And I guess if they've got an exam on one of those 5 days, we're asking them to, if they can consider giving themselves more time to
that's
travel.
great. It's just making sure that I appreciated, it's quite clear that we're talking to cruise ships. I wasn't quite sure if we're talking to the regulars, and it's easy. That's great. Thank you. No, that's
we socialise these plans with the West Harbour Community Board, and we're quite engaged with the community board. We also have some signage and things like that.
The other question is actually for you and possibly for Gretchen. In my previous life as councillors in Dunedin City, we met regularly with local MPs and those, especially those ministers, and had a really good free and frank with them about issues like funding. And there's one this afternoon on weather radars. And it was a really good way of just communicating those other issues that get difficult when you have to send them by an email or through official routes. And I do wonder if it's time that we as an ORC met with our the local MPs for doing some of that stuff, because there's a lot of stuff in the funding of transport and understanding the PT aspirations of our community that I think needs that level of better free and frank, and especially with the weather radar this afternoon. You were around the table when we talked about the weather radar in the Dunedin City Council, and that really got all of the MPs from every party working together on that. And those are the sort of things that sometimes we never see happening, but I'm just putting it out there. So that is a question.
I'm going to refer to Gretchen, but just say briefly, we've had a change of government, and I think it would be timely what you're suggesting on a number of matters, not just public transport. But Gretchen, did you want to make
the only comment that I can make is I agree that it's a good idea, and something that the council has done really well in the past as well. And the first step, I suppose, that I can think of towards that is Mayoral Forum are currently organising a get-together of all the local MPs as well as a first step, but that's more of a collaboration with the TAs obviously as well, and doing it ourselves as a council is a good idea. Definitely, we do need to build relationships early on. Sorry, I need to go for 15 minutes and then I'll be back.
We'll note that.
Sorry.
Thank you. Gary.
Thank you. Mine's just a logistics question around cruise ships, is that when they're coming in, are they able to advise us of how many passengers they have booked into excursions that will be going to the Eco Sanctuary and Sideways Rain and Clagton Fog to enjoy that experience no matter what, because they've paid for it, so they know how many are getting off, and then because they regularly visit, they know the numbers that are getting off regularly anyway. Do we get that information from them so we can forward plan?
Yes, yep, they've provided that, and it is part of that planning. So the extra 298 services that we are running are on 40 days over the 80-day periods, and of the kind of the cruise, about 81 days that the cruise ships are coming in. And we've based the providing those extra services around, as I said, the large and the multiple ships, but also when we know that there are fewer passengers booked on alternative or shuttle services. So that we have been, that information was previously provided and it's been used as part of our planning.
Okay, thanks. That's not from my question.
Elliot.
Yeah, I was just wondering around our work with the TAs and buses and infrastructure like bus priority stuff around the ground that is planned but yet to go through. If we are anticipating transport choices, funding kind of drying up around with the new government change, if that will affect those plans.
No, Kotahi have been great. Our transport choices funding is secure. However, we overspent on the first of our stops. So if all of the super stops are not rolled out, it's not a consequence of that change in that or that funding. It's just the way that costs worked out for the planning that we have done and we've had approved. Yeah.
Cool. Sorry. Richard did have a question, but no one online. So I think that completes the question. Alexa will move, but I'll second, and I'll just go to Lloyd. You've got a question?
Well, just a really simple question around the ports. So it's about 7 or 8 extra services a day with the boats and port. Is one trip, does that mean, and so I'm trying to is it like 4 in the afternoon, 4 in the morning? So they drive out empty, bring passengers in. There'll be one. Yeah. So it's just like, so we're only really doing 4 buses, which is a couple 100 passengers.
Yes.
Thereabouts, yeah.
Thereabouts, yeah.
No, thanks. Yeah, that was all my question. Was
cool. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Lorraine. It's been moved that the committee notes the report, moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. All those sorry, is there any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. I should note, I think Gary Maloney is sitting at the back, our former manager transport. So welcome, Gary. Sorry I didn't get an opportunity to mention you earlier, but nice to have you here in your new role with Waka Kotahi. Okay, moving on to item 8.2, Public Transport Network Performance Report. Welcome, Julian. Welcome, Jack, is it? Yes. Welcome, Jen. Pretty positive, eye-watering increases other than the patronage with the ferry service in Queenstown. But yeah, no, good stuff. Looking forward to hearing your comments.
Yeah, I'll just go through a few highlights because it's a fairly long report. As you noted, Q1 patronage for Otago as a whole has substantially increased across both networks compared to the same period last year. But also, what is quite important to note is that the patronage is also significantly ahead of the pre-COVID period of 2018-19, which I've said as in previous meetings is kind of the benchmark because it was the kind of a highest period before disruptions from things like driver shortages, COVID, border closures, reduced timetables, all that sort of thing. So it was our last full uninterrupted year, and we're significantly ahead of that point in time as well. So Queenstown Networks 57% up year on year compared to Q1 last year, and Dunedin is up 28%. Mobility is up 13%. Ferry patronage has dropped. I'll come on to that in a minute. Also, just as a point of interest, I received some data yesterday, which is preliminary data that isn't confirmed, so hence it's not in the report. But our patronage looks like it's tracking well ahead of all of the other regions apart from the big 3 of Auckland, Christchurch and Wellington. So I think we mentioned this previously a couple of meetings ago, and it's continuing a trend from the end of the previous financial year. But also interesting to bear in mind that several of those regions have bigger population bases, or at least bigger population bases near public transport to Otago. Some key things just to bear in mind when looking at these figures is that much of the, if not all of the previous year, had half-price fares in place across all of our services. And also through this quarter, we've got an entirely new set of concessions which make fare concessions, which make public transport more affordable for people under the age of 25, and also for community service card holders. But at the same time, for everyone else, we've gone back to the full $2 fare. So we also need to note that we're, for the entire of this quarter, we've been operating full timetables compared to last year, and some additional frequency in school services in the Dunedin area. As Lorraine mentioned, we have new Mosgiel additional frequency during the weeks. We have a Mosgiel Express service. We've increased the frequency of the Ridge Runner orbital service. In Queenstown, we've made some well-received minor changes to run bus routes more widely around Lake Hayes, and also to run them through the same service through Queenstown Central and 5 Mile, which is a big commercial and shopping and also residential area now. Back to the Queenstown ferry service, obviously it's an outlier in that patronage has dropped, but revenue has increased quite sharply. Currently, fares for that service are double what they were in the comparative period last year, which means on a B card that's $10 for a single fare, or $14 cash, compared to $5 and $7 last year. There are no concessions in place that were previously in place by the operator, but also the concessions that had been previously approved at a previous council meeting to be applied to the ferry service at this stage have not been implemented, and it's the operator's decision as to whether those are implemented, and discussions are ongoing at the moment on that. So at the moment, the price for a ferry fare is $10, and yeah, that's really the report in summary, and happy to take any questions.
Jack, was there anything from a transport planning perspective you wanted to add? Happy to take questions if there was some. Awesome. Queries, questions? Elliot.
Yeah, another annoying question after we speculate. But are we anticipating a downfall if those concessions fall away in the general network?
You mean if the new concessions are removed?
Yeah.
Short answer is I don't know. We haven't forecast what, at the moment, as far as I'm aware, what would happen if they were removed. The important thing to note is that even if everything went back to $2, you know, it's a reasonable fare. But separately, and you know, Lorraine's better qualified than me to talk to this. We have, you know, fares and frequency, business case, and other stuff going on related to fares.
Yeah, we have some analysis. We do think that it's a price sensitive market, and we've got evidence from that from the business case. Yeah.
Lloyd.
Oh, thank you. I've just got a couple of questions because I'm not too sure if I'm doing it right or not, but I was just like working out the fares per trip. And so if you take your total fare revenue divided by your patronage, in Dunedin it's $1.34. So is that how does that compute? So the fares are $2 in Dunedin?
That's the mix of the concessions. So if you're if you're 5 to 13, you're paying
60 cents
in Dunedin, and
80 cents in Queenstown.
Yeah. So in Queenstown it's $1.70 something, so it's quite a bit higher.
Yep.
I've got it written down here, $1.73.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that because there's less of those concession people traveling?
I think there's a part of that. So on the tables, a couple of tables further into the report, the charts, we see there's a split of the different fare types, and you can see that the you know, Super Gold, for example, is a huge magnitude greater in terms of, and a lot of those Super Gold journeys would be free. That's massively bigger in Dunedin. It's a very, very small percentage in Queenstown. But also what we saw during the border closure was a real big hit on Queenstown patronage, which indicates that a lot of the patronage was tourism based. Now, in order to benefit from the concessions, you need to have a registered B card. So if you jump off a plane or a coach and buy a B card and just use it straight away, you won't, you know, in a child, until you register that card, you won't benefit from the concession. We also have a much larger proportion of cash fares in Queenstown as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask that exact question as well. So that, that's interesting. It's just really around the, the relationship between patronage and fare amount. And I noted in the ferry, it's $10 is the fare. I think it's $9.96 is the average overall. So that means there's basically no concessions on the ferry.
Not at the moment, no.
So it's $9.96. So is it for the ferry, like for the older people, the great people amongst us? So there's no discount for community services card or anything like that?
Not at the moment, no.
Any plans?
So just to clarify on the ferry, that's it's a different contract from the rest of public transport.
Yeah.
It's a net contract, so the operator controls what we do with the fares, and the position at the moment is there's no concessions as we speak right now.
Yeah, thank you.
No further questions? If not, I'm making a habit of this, but Gemma Wilson is with us in the chamber, and I should have acknowledged you at the front end, but thank you for your contribution as the senior operations analyst. Would someone like to move that the report be noted? So basically we're, as the Passenger and Active Transport Committee, we're noting the report summarising public transport activity in Otago for the first quarter of the 23-24 year, moved by Elliot, seconded by Gary. Is there any discussion? Alexa.
I'd just like to say something here, because we've got nearly 1.5 million trips that rely on the work of a very small team, and getting the settings right for to get people to ride public transport is really tricky. So I just want to kind of take a hat off to you for this, because I think that's a really, really successful report. We may not be able to continue it, but for right now, let's just mark that. And these numbers show that the consistent application of commitment and strategic outcomes that we want, just keep on doing it no matter what, and with our partners, bringing them along, TAs, Whakatae, and getting to this point. I'm really, really pleased with these numbers, and long may they continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. So no further comments. If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Moving on to item 8.3, which is the Queenstown Transport Business Case Update, which includes a presentation, and I think it's Lorraine and Pim. And Bagish. Welcome, Bagish. Oh, Bagish, okay. Sorry, Bagish, I didn't pronounce your first name very well, but yeah, you're
it's Margis.
Very welcome to be here with us today. We look forward to your presentation.
Okay, sure. Wait a second. Just had some issues with that laptop, Lorraine, so we're going to. Yeah. I guess we'll join the meeting and. So the Queenstown Public Transport Business Case, so we can pretty much go for a refresher of the background. So Queenstown is the most popular tourist destination in New Zealand, and because of that, we do have like a major infrastructure and a infrastructure crisis, both for like housing and the roads. And for the last 30 years, Queenstown population has nearly tripled, and our transport network is nearly at capacity. So the previous business case, Queenstown business case, has stated that 40% alternate mode share is required for the network to work by 2028. And as a solution for the issue, the three pillar of approach was invented, which was infrastructure, PT services, operations, and the travel behavior change. And the Queenstown Airport has mentioned that like by 2032 it will be like 3 million visitors. And by this time, from the 2018 census journey to work,
only 5% take the bus. That kind of like shows that we need like a major intervention for major mode share, which is 40%. And the other committed infrastructure funding, skip some line. The infrastructure and the travel behavior. So the one is the economic stimulus pack. The other one is the active travel mode, which is just and the NSADAP. And for the travel behavior change, QLDC is doing a SSPC for travel demand management. And these are the problems and consequences came from the Queenstown business case, strategy case. So the Queenstown business case looks at the frequencies, routes, and the suitable vehicle type, but not at the fares. And it's a 30-year plan for the future transport investment decisions for the whole Queenstown network. And we identified two problems. Problem one, current capacity of the Queenstown's transport network means that public transport will not accommodate the future mode share target, which is 40%, which is quite high. And this problem two is the Queenstown public transport does not provide an attractive alternative to the private cars. And the causes behind it is the current public transport network, or like our buses are only at capacity. And also the roading network is also at capacity. We are all familiar with the congestion at Queenstown. And the other problem is the travel time problems because of the congestion and the infrequent services and the poor bus stop facilities, or like no bus stop facilities over there, and the spatial coverage.
Are you happy to take questions as we go? I should ask that.
Yeah, oh, please.
Just wondering about that 60% there in problem two, what that's referring to.
It's more like those problem statements. So the 40 and 100 kind of states to the 100%. So it's like a split.
Right, that's
like an ILM kind of split. Sorry for the confusion.
So if we wanted to invest, would be roughly 60% would be targeted. Well, our investment would be 60% targeting this and 40% targeting that.
Yeah. And the consequences would be like the system reliability, user experience, and regional economic development, and greenhouse gases, and access to opportunities, and the regional economic development. And this is the case for change from the strategic case. Since the population would be doubling in next 30 years, we need like a major intervention for Queenstown, which our public transport would be able to accommodate. And the risk of not doing is the negative economic and reputational outcomes of Queenstown. And since Queenstown is a quite popular among the tourism, would be quite having a negative reputation for the whole country. And also this would be a good time to combine, or like get a combined benefits from the Wakatahi programs, such as like NSADAP, or like parking management study and SSPC. So from the business case, we came to this preferred option. We did a consultation in October for two weeks, which extended to like 3 weeks because of the issues in Queenstown. The state emergency in Queenstown. And we had a quite good response with 240 responses, and some of the responses were on behalf of a community, or like a community representation. So we had a good response, and that feedback was taken into the analysis of the preferred option. So the preferred option is pretty much a composite option, which consists of having a split of route, which is right now the Arrowtown to Queenstown would be split into Arrowtown to Queenstown through Malagans, and the other one would be going through Frankton Hub, and the other one would be some Fernhill to Remarkables Park, and the other one would be Queenstown to Jack's Point. So it will be like splitting again over here. So people doesn't have to really go to Remarkable Parks to go to Jack's Point. That will be saving travel time. And some of other routes would be kind of similar. And our service plans would be extending from 6 a.m. to midnight. That will be helping the hospitality sector over there in Queenstown. And the ferries would be doing like similar services with 4 main stops. And the high,
operating from the existing
yeah,
or GG location.
yeah, that's right. So the high capacity buses would be used for 3 routes. And the other preferred options included replacing the current diesel bus fleets with electric vehicles and the articulated buses in 2030 for the 3 services, which is the 3 high capacity services and on-demand services for Queenstown Hill and Goldfield Heights. Then there's a public transport bus lane proposed over here next to the bridge. So that will be like helping with the congestion to the southern corridor. Then the 30 minutes frequency ferry with existing stops and the ferry options for Jack's Points were considered, but like there was really modest incremental increase in benefit, but with like really substantial cost. So that option was disregarded. And the next steps would be finalizing the economic and financial and commercial case. And the draft business case would be finished in December. And yeah, it would be endorsement and approval from the board, Wakatahi, or the Way2Go board and the council. Yep, that's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Vakesh. Queenstown District Council have the aspiration of zero carbon by 2030, and that's all been taken into account as you've worked through the business case.
Yes, so I should have, it's probably my fault, I should have edited. So the preferred option is what we really call at this stage the emerging preferred option. And now we have to fully model it to test it against those objectives, like how much it achieves the CO2 reduction targets or greenhouse gas target. We also have to do all the economic analysis. That's the bit that happens between now and the end of December, but it's definitely taken into account. But at this stage, this is the emerging preferred option is the best of the technical analysis, taking on board the recent consultation. We've still got to fully develop all of that, but yeah, we can report that back with the full business case.
Awesome questions, Elliot.
Yeah, I was just wondering, have we modelled the expected mode shift that we might expect from these changes? Yeah.
Yes.
That was the preliminary work to establish like the shortlist options. So,
yeah, and how did that compare to the 40% expected?
It's been like done like in the different ways. So we were taking as 40%, and we discovered like how that 40% it would be achieved. So there was like the model was like done from in a reverse engineering way rather than like we achieving there, but like rather what would we require to achieve there.
So the focus is on the shift of vehicles on the 6A because it's a very constrained network, and the different spines, which is really just 6 to the east, 6 to the south, and 6A primarily have different points at which they reach capacity. So I think what Varghese is saying, so we looked at the whole network as to what can it achieve, but the options were driven by, I guess, the first or the first most stressed point on the network.
Okay.
I think it looks great, and it's a question I asked you earlier, was the one-way to the public forum today, was the one-way bridge at Hawea, or on the road to Hawea. The one-way bridge at Arthur's Point will equally potentially cause, and it does for every bit of traffic around there. Is there any way of prioritising buses anywhere on the network to speed up the buses? And I know you've got the lines, but are the bus lanes suggested? And the question goes down to getting out. Often the inefficiency is the bus being able to pull out, and there isn't a law, I think, that prioritises it. People give way to buses trying to come out from a bus stop. Yes, yeah.
So the Mulligans Road was a sub-option, and it's only come back in on the basis of the consultation. It initially didn't perform well in the first analysis, and so we do need to resolve the infrastructure issues. In that case, the Edith Cavell Bridge, but the option is a sort of rough order, can operate on, or the high frequency standard bus that's proposed can operate on the network with that bridge as it is. However, we've only just identified, and we've done some very preliminary, is this okay? Other things which might be signalisation or temporary signals or something like that might be required. We just haven't got that far. This is hot off the press. But we do have bus lanes on other parts of the network. 6A to the east, they're part of the infrastructure NZ upgrade. There isn't, and along 6A where there isn't space in the corridor, we have other bus priority measures around. So when there's bus stops and there's pedestrian signalisation, we call it a bus jump or a bus gate where the bus can go through and get ahead of the traffic. Again, that's another thing where we're all working together, we're all at the table, but through the RLTP, we're also trying to see that line of sight around everybody's piece of the investment as well.
Okay, no, but there is nothing that gives buses priorities to pull out after a 50 person stop is here.
So we are only looking at like the services itself in this business case, and NSDAP has those bus priority lines for the other parts, which is mostly on 6A, SH6A and like SH6. And for the Mulligans, so the QLDC is looking at like providing a signalized thing on like the bridge.
The answer to that is no, it isn't a legal requirement.
Yeah.
They must have had a way
No. Yeah, which it's a really simple fix for every PT system. That would be a good one to put to your government. That's all.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, even I was thinking out loud here, sorry, but even a campaign to educate people who are in a car, just to encourage them to give way to a bus.
Yeah.
Sometimes happens. Alexa, sorry.
Can we not just pretend that it is law and just put a big sign on the buses, give way to the bus?
You must.
You must give way to the bus. What my question was key to this, the buses, is the NZ Up program being delivered. And I'm just wondering if that is still on time and under threat. It says it's going to be bus lanes in the business case by 2027. Are we on target, or are they on target?
So the NSDAP construction would be starting in early next year. So they are doing a stage 1, which would be including BP roundabout and the Frankton Hub bus and some of the bus lanes would be included from the BP roundabout back to 5 miles. So there would be a bus priority line included and would be built by NSDAP. For the next stages, I think they're still looking to provide something probably, but won't be there by 2027.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good at the moment. We can only go with that. Thank you very much.
Excellent. No further queries or questions?
That was my only one.
The whole concept of trying to solve the problem in Queenstown with traffic movement and the fact that, you alluded in the presentation where, you've got capacity literally in your roading network. The desirability for people to use buses more is tainted simply because the network is pretty much choked. And if you're up there in a morning or an afternoon on State Highway 6, between the Shotover and Frankton, or Frankton to the CBD, I mean, it really is tough going. And we obviously want to be part of the solution, but it's a pretty challenging task. And I hope, collectively, I think you talked about there are risks in all this, and Alexa's probably more aware from politically the risks, but to be able to get all the players lined up and committed and to deliver is probably the big challenge. And getting everybody on the same page at the same time with the appropriate resource. Anyway, would someone like to move the recommendations set out listed there? We note the report, note the key consultation results, note the strategic case document, note that the content of the business case will inform decisions on options for consultation as part of the upcoming long-term process. And finally, notes that the full Queenstown public transport business case will be presented for approval at the next committee meeting.
Sorry, can I just display it, make one? That should say endorsement at the next committee meeting.
Oh, sorry.
So apologies for that.
Oh, no, thank you.
Getting used to
Thank you, Richard. Cheers for that. Someone like to move? Moved by Alexa, seconded by Gretchen. Are there any speakers? Harry.
Yes, sorry, were you going to speak?
There you go.
No. Look, I support what is here. I think until QLDC and New Zealand Inc. or the New Zealand government get real about New Zealand's dual and the infrastructure required to support New Zealand's dual, and moves away from the theory of we'll leave roads basically as they are, we will keep advancing growth, and we will force people into mode shift. Until we get past that and recognise that the bar, as they keep developing, keeps stepping upwards, even the base requirement of investment is still needed in roads. They still need to grow. We still need 4 lanes between Lake Hayes and the BP roundabout, even as a basic. Until we get that, I don't think we'll see that level of mode shift, because we have to further advance public transport, and public transport becomes even more inconvenience because it has to travel on the same roads that are currently gridlocked. Couple into that, New Zealand drivers are the worst in the world. We do not have the courtesy that you see that has evolved over time in other countries and other cities that I've lived in, where the buses are always let in alongside others. There's a common courtesy that evolves. We haven't got there yet. This is all still too new. I think this government needs to wake up and support this area more with more investment.
Sorry, Alexa.
That's all right. I'll just,
Go for it.
I'd like to say something, because this business case, I mean, the growth figures for Queenstown are actually, banged on about this a lot, but this business case shows that we've tripled in 30 years the population of Queenstown. That means an average growth rate of around 4%. I don't know, something like that. So while there's huge fluctuations year to year, I just bring to everyone's attention that this year's had the highest that anybody's ever remembered, of 8%. And, over the 30 years that we've had a tripling of the population, and 8%, I mean, it won't keep up at that rate, but it's a very scary number if you think about it. But in those 30 years, we've had a new bridge, some widening here and there, a bunch of new roundabouts, but there's no way there's been a 30% increase in roading capacity, not even probably 10%. But then, so even, and I know NZUP's put in, 115 billion, I think that's a huge amount of money if they can get it delivered. But even that can't respond to this. So we really have to do everything that we possibly can to just chase that curve and try and get up with it as much as we can. And it is a Sisyphean task. We're just going to have to keep doing it and keep coming back to this. So, the Busmax one is the right one for now until we can figure out the next things, but expect us to be coming back to this again. in another year or two, because it's just going to keep happening. So I wanted to make that comment as we.
Excellent, thank you. Any further speakers? If not, I'll put the 5 recommendations all as one. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bakich, for the presentation.
Thank you.
So we're moving on to 8.4, which is the Dunedin Pearson and Frequency business case. Okay.
That's what we're on here.
A new word. You can spell it. There's a presentation involved here, so just bear with us for a short period.
Yep.
Okay.
There's a kid. So we can keep that at the forefront in education.
Alexa, just need to be slightly longer because I literally can't.
I know.
I'm sitting here.
It's what I just let her know and she lets you know.
Let me get you a cushion.
Or I can come.
It's not only you, it's.
Put your seat up.
Not the first person that.
Your seat is your seat is 2 inches lower than yours. You need to bring your seat up.
Oh, that's because I have to have my feet on the ground then.
Wait, pull it, don't swap.
You can put them up.
Okay, so we've got 8.4 Dunedin Fares and Frequency business case. This the business case for Dunedin is slightly advanced, more advanced than the one that has been dealing with Queenstown or discussing Queenstown business case. I was fortunate enough yesterday afternoon when the council meeting, the workshop finished. I bumped into Lorraine in the bus hub and we, okay. What I suggest we adjourn for 5 minutes, grab a coffee, bring it back in and we'll. Okay, I'll stand adjourned, I'll move, second by Elliot. Any discussion? If not, we'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
This
So welcome back, people who are online. We're in the hands of Lorraine for the Fears and Frequency single stage business case for Dunedin. And hopefully the technology will deliver.
Excellent, thank you. Continuing the theme of business cases, this provides a recommendation to council that we use the preferred option for the Fears and Frequency business case for the Dunedin network as the basis of preparing for the council's long-term plan. And I have a PowerPoint, and I also have online joined us Doug Ware from Stantec. Stantec helped us considerably with the business case and have a longer involvement than myself. And so as we work through the presentation, I'm happy to take any questions. However, some of them I possibly won't be able to answer because if they relate to modelling and some of the complexities. There's a comprehensive amount of detailed modelling and analysis. We've got Doug online to help us.
Well, welcome to the committee, Doug. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you. Good morning, all.
Cheers.
Sorry, I used to a touch screen. Maybe it might not be going to work.
What part of the country are you in, Doug?
I call Wellington home, at least for the last 20 years I have, but have worked frequently in Dunedin actually over the last 10 years in particular. So very familiar.
Thank you.
So just for a recap, the Fears and Frequency business case sets the path for our PT investment improvement investments on the Dunedin network. It's come from the Shaping Future Transport Program business case that was worked on again with Dunedin City Council and Waka Kotahi, and looking at changes to the Dunedin network, specifically around the building of the new Dunedin Hospital. And it's from the Shaping Future Dunedin Transport business case that we were given a contribution to 8% PT mode share target by 2030. So it's always interesting to remember that these business cases have a starting point that sometimes seems maybe might not have been the right place or isn't the same when you get to the ending point. As I said, this is a comprehensive business case. It's been over 9 months in development, and the program business case was completed before that. So it's everybody's working with their best information at the time, and this is where this one has landed, but it's where it started from. And the objective of this business case was to identify a realistic and cost-effective public transport solution to help achieve that 8%. And the focus was on fares and frequencies and not routes. And I just made that point because it's also a little bit different from Queenstown, where we have constrained routes, but we still look very closely about where they should be and capacity. The focus here on fares and frequency, you might say in an ideal world, a route in Dunedin where, say, Great King Street was a key PT corridor joining up the hospital, but also the university, Polytech and the CBD. But that is obviously in part state highway. And so that's why we're working with everybody with what bits they've got on the network. And just to be clear, that sort of changes to those sorts of things were not within the scope of this business case. And then just to give the context that we're trying to get people onto PT, but we have a different growth dynamic here. So Queenstown is really trying to accommodate new growth. Here it's I guess a more shift in behaviours and encouragement from people, because we're not going to be driven by so much by the numbers of people, but also we can't just put new routes, if we were doing that, to places where the new growth is coming, to pick them up, say, better than we do the existing population. So it's a different kind of way that we go about having to crack the chestnut with this one. And we're also obviously looking at getting people onto PT to improve the livability of the city, but also to achieve reductions in greenhouse gases as well. The case for change was the travel disruption associated with the new hospital presents an opportunity for that shift of behaviours and how people choose to travel. And Dunedin also shows an excellent potential for future mode share. However, the starting point, which again, it goes back to 2018 and when the program business case was prepared, is that people in Dunedin using public transport is low at around about 3.4%, making the journey to work. But why we say we've got an excellent potential for mode share, we do also have high alternative modes in walking and cycling. And so you can use your public transport network to as leverage to not shift people from walking and cycling necessarily, but to make walking and cycling also and PT a combined choice for more people. And we're pretty clear that without significant investment, mode share, while it will grow, it will remain relatively low. And then the benefits to be realised are health benefits, travel time savings, and the emissions reduction, and I'm required to put improved parking availability here, but it is that's important for people, especially if they need to access the hospital, and or even for businesses and the CBD, that they have parking that suits their needs. So they're coming into town and they can park for 2 hours, or they can get to the hospital appointment and find parking, and it's not a challenge because of people who are perhaps using all day parking, that we want to encourage a more attractive PT offering. So that really is just what you've probably seen in the documentation, how we set it all out, and how we draw the, I guess, the line of sight between what we're trying to do and why. So to provide an attractive option, we had to look at why public transport is less attractive. And then we, as part of this business case, we looked at the willingness to pay for people to address the things that were barriers or disincentives to taking public transport. And so I think a lot of that has been previously sort of reported as a progress update, but we had a really comprehensive survey and a really comprehensive, really high response rate about what people were willing to pay and what they weren't willing to pay really to get onto public transport. So that's all factored in. And again, I think we've previously reported, but then the processes, we took a very long list of interventions, a mix of fares and frequencies across a whole range of services, or all of our services, but how we would mix them up as to primary and secondary services, what range of fares could be on offer, and we took them through a range of analysis and sifting and filtering down to a short list of preferred packages. And when we got there, we still hadn't got it quite right. So we had to take the short list and work on a few alternatives. And that's where we've come up with the package 16B, which is sort of spoken to in length in the paper. But in essence, we would be looking at a 50-cent B card fare for the adult B card, with other fare offerings being relative to that, same as present, and then looking at service frequencies and spans for primary services of essentially 15-minute headways, and during weekdays and 30-minute headways, and then for secondary services 15-minute headways at peak, so 15-minute frequencies at peak and 30 minutes at other times. And then for the few targeted services that we have, we're proposing to retain current levels of service at this point of time. So as in difference to where the emerging, what should have been presented as the emerging preferred option in the Queenstown business case, we've done the economic analysis on this and looked at the benefits and costs. This just sort of spells it out a little bit more. So the implementation of how we'd roll it out with the primary and secondary services, and then more information in the report in terms of timing, and then what just have a look at what new routes that would be impacting on. So this is where we're sort of saying this is the preferred option. Now this is what it is going to look like in terms of costs, and then over time, this is why we're wanting to get the endorsement to use it as the basis for the LTP. And in total, the additional investment on top of what we call the de minimum, so that's our keeping on providing public transport services, there's this investment program of around about 196 million over 10 years. And then this just shows that with endorsement for the business case, or as we move through in a business case, we have been working with Waka Kotahi and we'll be seeking endorsement. And if approved and funding's available, then the package would be us, ORC, providing the 49% local share through the rates, which would, again, we would consult on through the LTP and what that package looks like, and with Waka Kotahi coming to the party with the funding assistance ratio of 51%. The new government introduces a TIFA, a targeted investment rate, but probably unlikely for Dunedin. But with this, there are still funding risks. There's that issue around the transport investments priorities of the new government. I mentioned previously that headroom in the activity class that is there in the draft GPS. Waka Kotahi may not approve funding, so the proposal for this business case going to the board is we will take it up with the Queenstown business case when we have it and present it as a package of investment for public transport in Otago, so that the Waka Kotahi can see the I guess the direction that this council is taking, and that is hopefully seen as the response to what the community wants to addressing or providing public transport and addressing sort of the environmental concerns for the greenhouse gases. However, there are bound to be competing priorities. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there's the business case, as is every business case we do the modelling. Modelling is just modelling, it's the best that we can do. And if we've got the best people doing it with Stantec, and Doug will be able to explain in much better detail, but parameters can change. Just around the modelling, what the investment package is, it's based on what we call the 50th percentile. So it's if we look at thousands of these projects, similar projects, 50% would be delivered at this price. And we also look at the 95th percentile just as a gauge as well. But it's just to provide that investment confidence around the overall numbers. And so this has changed slightly, but this is the next steps. As the changes just with that decision now to take the business cases for the Otago region up together to the board in the new year. It was a little bit around it's a preferred approach to put package up together, because although we're always really focused on what we're doing here, across the country, we're not always going to have that visibility. So that was a preferred approach. It's also a bit around the timing with the board dates and committee meetings. Other than that, we will, there's the line there which is that actively pursues supplementary funding sources. That relates a little bit back to questions earlier on the earlier reports. There possibly isn't huge potential, but that's what we will keep doing. And then we can factor that into, again, the LTP calculations of where costs fall. Any questions?
Excellent, thank you very much, Lorraine.
Mary, just in terms of this paper and before we into questions. So this paper is recommending that council endorses this option for inclusion in the RLTP, so the Regional Land Transport Plan, which is the document that effectively guides any future Waka Kotahi funding. This doesn't lock us into a decision around a preferred option for our long-term plan. That conversation still has to happen, and we still have to present the full financials to you as part of that process. So there is, and this is the challenge we have with effectively two parallel processes running at the moment. But the decisions today allows staff, based on the business case, which you've now seen as a very thorough process and has reached an outcome, enables staff to carry on with their RLTP process and ensure we meet those timeframes and don't risk getting no funding at all. We are still through our LTP coming back to you with full financials to enable those decisions around options and a preferred option to consult with the community.
Thanks, Richard. And just looking at that recommendation 4, where it says, Lloyd's raised this with me, notes that the final business case will be presented to the next Public and Active Transport Committee meeting for approval, should be for consideration.
Yes, sorry for endorsement.
No, cool. Thank you. Doug, was there anything you wanted to comment on at this stage, or were you just happy to take questions?
Nothing specifically, but I'm happy to take questions.
Cool, thank you. Questions for Lorraine or Doug? Oh, we've actually got Brian online who has a question. Not sure whether it's for Lorraine or Doug, but we're in your hands, Brian. Can't hear you.
And
can you start again, Brian, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us, Brian?
That might be the problem.
Yeah, sorry, Brian. You're not going to hear this, but we can't hear you.
Maybe send them a chat.
Okay, Richard. Okay, Richard will deal with that. Any other queries? Elliot.
Yeah, I'm just like looking at the timetable changes in that package, and the expanding it to 6 a.m. to 11:30 is going to be a game changer. But a lot of people, but something a few, some of our many students in the city and also a lot of shift workers have raised with me is the potential for having, you know, maybe 1 or 2 routes that have that even longer, you know, on a Friday or Saturday night, both for, as we mentioned in the Queenstown case, to support the hospitality network, but mostly just to get people like home safe. Is that something that was considered in the business case at all?
We not specifically as an option. It was primarily focused on I guess travel to work and education, but throughout the day and into the evening, and certainly trying to pick up shift workers as much as possible, and as you say, students as well. But we didn't sort of consider options that looked at services beyond that 11:30 p.m. period. That 11:30 p.m. sort of cutoff, if you like, is sort of really based on shift changes at the hospital, and also obviously a lot of sort of later night sort of businesses tend to sort of close up, and things like movies and so on at about that time of night as well.
Thank you.
We actually have a slightly later service span on Fridays and Saturdays for Route 8. I don't think that we're necessarily looking at bringing that back to 11, like currently, that we're bringing that back, but we haven't specifically considered extending that further at this stage.
Gretchen.
I was just wondering about the analysis of the data in terms of, it's great that we got 1,800 responses about, that's really awesome. But I was wondering when you were analysing that, whether it was broken down into categories, like, for example, how many are responding from being current users through to not currently users, or currently subsidised versus, you know, what sort of detail was sitting in behind that. And also just quite a weighting was given to the survey responses, which is totally appropriate, but whether or not for a business case there's other things that are drawn on, like, I don't know, what has worked across, you know, from around the world, around knowledge we know about what works best.
So I'll start, but I think I'll be handing over to Doug. But yeah, certainly the starting point for looking at causes, we did draw on what works is quite a good, if you like, academic knowledge of what encourages people on to PT. It's always going to be situational. And then the actual modelling of what it looks like is we had 2 models, which Doug can also talk better to you. So we looked at the levers model and the cube model, which is the distributional model. And then in terms of the survey, we'll have to hand over to Doug from memory. We have it, but I'm not confident to speak to it because that was really processed by the Stantec team.
So yes, the short answer is we did sort of break down into different groups, and certainly we were keen to find out how different groups responded. It's actually a while since I looked at that material, so I can't give you a specific answer, but I'm not even sure if we included it as an appendix to the business case. I think we did, but we can certainly sort of share that as well. I think Lorraine will have a copy of that, and that the report that was done that sort of breaks down the responses, and they're quite interesting to just sort of see people's preferences. in terms of the, as Lorraine said, sort of informing the business case with other angles, if you like, or elements, very much so. A lot of what we've done is actually based on what is generally regarded as best practice both in New Zealand and internationally. And so, for example, we've used what are regarded as fairly standard service demand elasticities, and fair elasticities, which I won't go into a lot of detail on, but they essentially are the responses that are typically found when you make a change to either service levels or fares, and they're based on lots of research, some in New Zealand and a lot overseas. The service levels that we've ended up with, and this was not in any way by planning or design, but are actually quite consistent with other benchmark cities in New Zealand. So, for example, Nelson has just implemented a new or revised bus system. In that case, they're not bringing in increased peak service frequencies until I think it's 6 years' time. That's for budget reasons, but throughout the day, those 30-minute frequencies are now standard in Nelson, although they don't have the same service span as what is being proposed in Dunedin. It is obviously a different city. Also, Palmerston North, where we've also done quite a bit of work in support of the regional council there, and they're rolling out again sort of 30-minute off-peak, 15-minute peak service levels there with increased service spans. And those all-day corridors running at sort of the really core corridors running at every 15 minutes all day throughout the day, 7 days a week, is actually what you do find. And again, tends to be the bigger cities, so Auckland and Wellington, but on those very core corridors, and they are heavily used. They're found to be sort of to get a very heavy response. So I guess we've sort of drawn on both that best practice, but also had an eye on what is being done elsewhere, either through projects we've been involved with, but just more generally, we're sort of aware of what's going on in each of the different cities, and essentially sort of have landed in that sort of area as a result.
Thanks for that, Doug. Brian's question was 72% of those surveyed support current fares. Can we include current fares in the LTP consultations? I'm just going to pass that to Richard.
That's in paragraph 13 that Brian's picked up there. So yes, the options available for long-term plan consultation could include a number of things, but generally we would always include a status quo option, which might be increased frequency but same fares, and variations of that. So yep, Brian, absolutely it can be, but that's a decision for council to make when we bring those options forward for you to include.
Thanks, Richard. Lorraine, I just had a query about, you had the time frame up there for next steps before, and you're going to approach Waka Kotahi for endorsement, etc. in the new year, and then you had consideration of supplementary income or something along those lines. So I was just wondering whether when you go to Waka Kotahi, is it better to have not confirmation but general intent about supplementary income? And I obviously immediately think of what Queenstown Lakes District Council do in terms of the offsetting of costs for us from their parking revenue, 700K. So do you understand my question? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it's good to have the information, and if we've got good confidence, so that's another reason why if we're exploring those things, is if another party comes to the table, they might have to show that they're including that in their financial planning documents, and if we have that, then we would definitely present that to.
Yeah, and I appreciate that Queenstown Lakes District Council. I'm not suggesting that is going to be a future contribution, but I think it possibly would be useful if we had even a letter of support from both councils to suggest that it is their intent to whatever wording they want to put in, but at least if we had some sort of direction that they're supportive of enhanced services going forward or something in that general sort of
Yeah.
direction? I might leave that to Gretchen. I can follow that up with Gretchen. Yeah, that was good. Any other queries? Elliot, happy to move. We've got a seconder, Alexa. No further questions. Any discussion? Let's speak to the motion. Elliot.
Speak to it. Yeah, I mean, speaking in support of us endorsing that, I think, you know, as I said, every 15 minutes or during the day for primary routes and at peak times for secondary routes, and every 30 minutes outside of that will be a transformational change. You know, people won't have to plan hours ahead to get from A to B, and extending that from 6 AM to 11:30 will also be a game shifter. As I said, I think those are the two biggest factors, that frequency, reliability and stuff, but I don't think that means cost isn't a factor too, and those 50-cent fares will be a really, really attractive fare for anyone who struggles with, you know, transport inequality. And it's honestly disappointing that Waikato is against free fares, as the paper says, when our data highlights it as one of the best options. But regardless, 50 cents is still a pretty good second best, I reckon, as the modelling shows that will help that achieve that better mode shift as well. I know we're not voting to actually approve this yet, just put it forward to the RLTP, but I think it's an important step, so very excited to support it. Kia ora.
Excellent. Thank you. Alexa.
I'm just really pleased to see this come in, and I particularly like the diagram on, I don't know what page it was. It just tells us the preferred program, figure 1, and it just communicates the benefits of this so well, and a really good business case. Thank you very much.
So, Gary, then Gretchen.
Thank you. I'll support it. I have some concerns around the 50-cent fare and the achievability of it, because you only have really 3 funding sources. There's targeted rates, mayoral rates, there's Wakatahi, and then there's fares. And so as you shuffle those 3 golden gooses, I suppose, a free fare would mean you're cutting one right out, you're down to 2, which in my mind places quite an imbalance upon the targeted rate pays. If it's about incentive to get more people on buses, then I'll be really keen to see, as the numbers come through in the LTP, what difference does it make between $1 and $2? And are we achieving that incentive potentially at a higher number than 50 cents, so that we do support this, because this will always be loss-making. It will always be a burden on our ratepayers. So, but that's why I'll support what we have here. Thank you.
Thank you. Gretchen.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that firstly, the benefits are clear for the city of Dunedin in terms of lifting our game in public transport. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that for a business case, we need to look at the levers that we can pull, but to actually achieve the first point, we need to be working really closely with anyone else that can pull levers as well, because as has been discussed, the preferred option is double the lower doing kind of the same as we're doing now approach in cost. So yeah, it's a big thing to consider for our ratepayers, and we will need to be having that discussion, but we also need to be thinking about what other things can be done to achieve the outcomes that we all want. Thanks.
Any further speakers? And my only comment would be, you know, to see what's starting to potentially crystallise into an affordable, safe, reliable, convenient, sustainable passenger transport system to meet the customer's needs is exciting. So yeah, and I need just to acknowledge Stantec and Doug's contribution, much appreciated, and yours as well, Lorraine, and the rest of the team. Thank you very much. So without further ado, I will put those recommendations, so 4 recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to that additional item, which is the item 8.5, the security for Dunedin public transport. The item is essentially associated with a funding shortfall for the balance of this financial year. And I think it was 126,002 buckets. Are there any questions for Julian, I think is the report writer, or Lorraine?
Yeah,
Oh,
Pim's online to manage this one as well.
Sorry. Pim, was there anything you wanted to make a comment with regards to this? Oh,
Can I
sorry.
just intro this just because we did, we have moved the paper. So initially, as with any contract paper, we check it against the reasons for public excluded, and this one met those. So it was a non-public, acknowledging that there was then some public interest generated in this report. So we've removed that information to ensure that we don't undermine any future contract or any future tendering process or current contract information, and have put it into the public agenda to allow that conversation to occur. The reason it's here is that we have received feedback before around management of overspends, and while it is an operational matter to ensure the network is safe, we do acknowledge that we have been asked to be transparent with costs. So where we have an overspend, we're bringing it to you just to note that and seek your okay to continue with that process. So the paper is online and has been since earlier in the week, and it's in your resource centre. With that confidential information, commercially sensitive information removed, and Pim has some background on the process, the security process itself, but I think we're just happy to open up to questions.
Good as gold. I've got a question here from Brian. What community policing is occurring at the bus hub? So maybe for you, Pim.
It's not a very good question for me. I'm sorry, Andrew. I know we've got a police station right there next to the bus hub, but you know, we started providing security of our own last year because of the issues that were happening around the bus hub, and some issues I think I raised with you at the time, possibly with Gretchen when she became chair, and our concerns around safety.
Thanks, Pim.
I can answer that question.
Julian, I want you to come up to the table just to make sure people hear the answer, if that's okay. And I'm mainly talking about people online, hopefully they can hear us.
Just to clarify, the police themselves did, and it was reported in the media, have stepped up their patrols in the bus hub itself, in addition to what we're doing. So they have recognised that there's a benefit for them patrolling the bus hub more often. So they have done that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Elliot and then Alexa.
Shadow and alternate information, but I do have a question.
Yep, you go for the question. Yes.
I'm just wondering if so under the options, option D is to increase the scope. In theory, could that increased scope cover the cruise ship days and help in, you know, ensuring a limited amount of cruise ship passengers are going on any given pass, so that there's room for you know, those West Harbour passengers further along and helping manage some of those issues with the larger crowds?
We have a different plan in place for the cruise ship passengers. It didn't happen on Monday, but it is in place for those ones. This is around the ongoing security in the bus stop and some additional randomised travelling on the buses. Yeah, and this is very focused on the fact that it's the situation in Dunedin is the same across New Zealand, and in fact, wherever public transport is, you know, antisocial behaviour tends to be on the rise. We don't have bad antisocial behaviour, but it is a public space, and it is also a place of the workers, our contractors, our bus drivers.
And I would say, add to that too, Elliot, that queue management and interaction with members of the public in terms of cruise ship is a very different responsibility to the general security presence. So appreciate the question and the intent, but I wouldn't conflate the two in terms of what we're seeking as an outcome from the security trial.
Okay. Yeah, I just sort of had heard some feedback around some, cases of abuse and stuff there. So I thought maybe that could be a potential solution there, but if that's not able to convert it all, then
come back to you with regards to the shadow motion. Sir and Helen.
I'm wondering, team, if any principles of crime prevention through design have been used in thinking about this problem. It's, there's the Justice Department, I think, was commissioned a report into that some years ago for New Zealand. And I wonder if, have we considered those sorts of principles?
So we always consider CPTED when we're looking at public transport infrastructure, and that is part of what we're trying to coordinate better with the bus stop audits, so that those ones are. The hub is built, is constructed, it is where it is. There's, the car park on one side, and there's not a lot of what we call active frontage, which provides that natural surveillance. So this is a response to the situation that it is. Certainly any time and at the outset of the design, CPTED would have been considered, but you'll be aware that the adjoining land uses, apart from the car park and the police, have changed over time as well.
Can I have a supplement?
Absolutely.
One other, I noticed down there, and this is purely anecdotal, I noticed that things are much friendlier when the coffee cart's open. And, if the coffee cart was still open or something similar, right through the whole hours that the bus, even through the night, to have something that does offer some of that natural surveillance. There is enough space for that. I just don't know if I don't know. And you've obviously thought about it. Thank you.
Ellen.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Julian, you might already have answered this partially, but I guess I was wondering, have we had any exploration or thought given to who else might be able to or might be responsible for providing this sort of securities service?
You mean in terms of all?
Yeah, I mean, why does the ORC do this if it's security in a public place? Have we sort of explored that?
Well, we work with Dunedin City Council on the overall security in and around the bus stop.
And Julian had said you'd had discussions clearly with the police station right there too.
Yeah, we've used the security working with the police to target, specific bus route and a couple of other things as well. But the service itself, which I think is noted in the paper, is effectively an extension of what DCC are doing in surrounding streets.
Right, yeah.
I think it would be seen as supplementary to the role that fundamentally sits with the police, and where they're potentially not able through resources or whatever else to provide absolute coverage of this, then the staff have determined that having a small amount of complementary security as a presence just provides that level of certainty to people either using public transport or traversing through the bus hub for another reason. In an ideal world, it may not be required if those resources were elsewhere, but I think it's just the situation we've got in trying to supplement what is there anyway.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Alexa?
Are police willing to help with this? Are we? I realise you're in discussions with them, but are they going to back us up?
Oh, absolutely. I need to be clear, we don't have heightened or unusual antisocial behaviour. It's just, consistent and probably to a lower level generally. I don't want to be alarmist. And what we found was the original interventions improved the situation, even as it was. And then in relation to a few specific events, we trialled the random on buses, and we've had very good feedback from both the drivers and in terms of events that come into us or notifications that we have receive on antisocial behaviour.
Thanks.
Yeah, there seems to be pretty solid evidence to retain the level of service that exists up until
this month, currently exists. Are there any further questions? If not, I go to Elliot. Is the big button? Oh, is it? Okay.
Lock Pim's hand up.
I'll come back to you in a moment, Elliot. Pim.
I was just going to add to Lorraine. I mean, Lorraine started with us in February. I think I signed off the original, well, I was notified of the original security measure. Actually, I got an email, I checked my emails on the 5th of October, just before the election, actually, which is why I think I raised it with you, Andrew, before I did with Gretchen. But you might remember that there was a group of young people congregating around the hub, and that was a headache for us at that time. And they'd shifted from somewhere else. The police's issue is they don't, you know, they try and work to stop that sort of congregation of antisocial behaviour wherever it occurs. So we did have a problem with a group of people causing problems around the hub. And since we've had the security in, we haven't had that issue. So, you know, there's a reason why we bought this in. Gavin was general manager at the time. He actually approved it, let me know. I'd had a discussion, I think, with you, if I remember rightly, Andrew. It was a concern. We'd had a number of complaints from the public. And then I have checked and I did extend my approval for the last 2 months of the last financial year. So that's the history to it.
Thanks very much, Elliot.
Yeah,
happy to move that we note the report and that we recommend you to council the approval for the extension of the bus hub and on-bus security trial to 30 June 2024 at the cost of 126,000. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that.
I've got a second. I have a second. Sorry, you go.
I think it's an unfortunate situation to be in, to have to put this on. You know, especially when, I mean, yeah, it shouldn't be our job. But I think that as Alexa mentioned earlier, there is some wider design that could help here. I think the issue Pim talked about with young people congregating around the bus hub is just sort of evidence of a lack of third spaces around the city in general, and perhaps better design around that could help us. But I think there are some real and reoccurring safety issues, both for our passengers and our bus drivers, and we don't want anyone to be put off riding a bus because they're fearful. That shouldn't be the case under any circumstances. I've had someone come to me, a trans woman who was at the bus hub and had a knife pulled on her with transphobic threats and stuff. And I don't know whether this was during the trial or whether that was before. So if this is, you know, doesn't solve these issues, maybe we do need to look at increasing the scope or working better with police or something. But I certainly would want to keep the current level at the very least for these people who, you know, if something like that happens, they're never going to go to the bus hub again. And so we really don't want that happening at our centre of operations for our bus network and on the buses themselves. So I think we want to give people confidence that that won't be the case. And so we should continue. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Any further speakers? Lloyd.
You know, I'd like to say something. I've been pretty quiet today. I think so. What my take on this is basically going back, you know, 12 months ago. There's a few issues, and the response to that was to increase this security presence around the bus hubs. That trial has been very successful because it seems to be things were pretty quietened down. But we do have an 8-month gap just because of the timing between starting the trial and when the long-term plan rolls around to start again. So it just makes complete sense to me that we can continue with what's been successful and take it to the end of the year. And of course, we'll become part of the extended planning process going into the future. I think as a council, we're tasked with providing public transport to our city, to our main centres, and I think, and the one thing I always say is if we're tasked to do something, we want to do it well, and we want to do it the best of our ability and look at all avenues. I think it's really important, you know, with the previous papers we've had also that our community is involved in making the decisions, which will come through at the long-term plan. So I think it'd be wrong to make a change now, prior to giving them a decision, and a time when they can make decisions. I think, so part of providing a good transport system is, transport network is that we have to ensure that our travellers are confident that they'll be safe when travelling on public transport. And in fact, I'd imagine many of our people will travel on public transport because of the safety that it provides, as opposed to like walking and, you know, and being alone. So they want to be around people. So I think it's imperative that we keep that using what's working. And so I think it's and at the end of the day, if you just look at you know, I've lost it off my screen, but the last point, which is basically Otago of our OOC strategic direction is sustainable, safe and inclusive public transport. So it fits exactly in that line that we are going to be providing that service to our ratepayers. So I'll definitely be in support of it.
Excellent, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the two motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. That concludes the Public and Active Transport Committee meeting. I will conclude with a closing karakia. Ki tau, tiranga I mate ki runga in the iwi e to ao, which basically says, let peace reign on all peoples of the world. Amen. Thank you very much for your attendance, your assistance and contribution. And enjoy the rest of your day. And some of us will be back here in the room at 1 o'clock. And I'm not sure who's cheering safety and resilience, but it'll be Gary or it's Gary. Excellent. We'll look forward